Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the shop. It's a nice crisp autumn morning. My sinuses are a little messed up, so we're going to do some bike maintenance. And today we're going to talk about chain inspection, and let's see if we need to change this thing out. But first rule, always use the tools you have available. So let's get this thing on some stands. So the victim on the chopping block today is my very own 2012 GSXR 600 with 15,670-ish miles on it. And this thing may or may not still have the factory chain on it. I bought it earlier this year and I'm pretty sure it's never been changed, but it was pretty well maintained. It checked out good then. Now we put several miles on it, so we're going to check it out and see where we stand. But first we need to go over to the workbench and let's talk about chain sizes, what the numbers mean, and how we can apply that to this inspection. Let's go. To go over the numbers, we're going to use this piece of scrap chain out of my scrap metal. It'll work just fine for this demonstration. So to understand the chain inspection a little bit better, it's good to know what the numbers mean on your chain size. Your averages are like a 420, a 520, 525, 530, sometimes 630. The first number in that is the length of the pitch, which is from pin to pin in eighths of an inch. So a 420 chain would be 4/8 of an inch, 5 would be 5/8, 6 would be 6/8. You can convert that over to 4/8 being half an inch from pin to pin, 5/8 being 5/8 from pin to pin, and 6/8 from pin to pin, which is 3/4 of an inch. Now to measure this, you can do it a lot of different ways. You can use a tape measure, you can use a ruler, or you can use calipers. So on your ruler, you line up on the center of one pin with your mark, center of the other pin on the other mark, and then count the eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we know that this should be 500 series chain. If you are using a digital caliper, you can come in on top of a rivet, measure it, zero out, and then measure across 2 rivets. And that will get you pretty close. It depends a little bit on the squish, but there you would be within about 3/1000ths of an inch, being 5/8 chain. The last two numbers of your chain size apply to the inside width of the chain, or the length of this roller in here. The middle digit is the 1/8 of an inch increments for the width, and the last digit is basically the percentage of an eighth added to the second number. So on a 520, you know that the length from pin to pin is 5/8 of an inch. The 20 would be 2/8 wide, which would be a 1/4 inch wide. On a 525, it would be that 1/4 inch plus half, or 0.5 of an eighth of an inch added to it, which would give you 5/16, or 0.3125 inches on the inside width of the chain there. Now to measure this, we use a caliper, and I have no idea what this chain is, so we're about to find out together. So we'll zero the caliper out, come inside, and you can measure the inside of the link at the roller. And there we get 0.260, which this chain is old and very worn, so I would say that that should be a 250, which would give us a 520 chain. There are other size chains that end in an eighth, like a 428 or a 528 or 538. They're a lot less common, but they give a little bit more clearance on the inside to the sprocket because this roller length is just slightly longer. They're better in dirty applications, like we've used them in ATV racing for cross-country races, where the chain is going to be exposed to mud and sand, a lot of gritty material that you want to get out of there. That way it doesn't get pinched between the roller and the sprocket tooth and cause excessive wear there. Now that we have the basic knowledge and what the chain numbers mean, we can use that for our measurements on our chain inspection. So let's head back over to the bike and we'll check that out. Alright, so I'm sure the comment section will correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that this blue link right here is a Suzuki chain. And as you can tell, it's got a little hint of rust. The O-rings are a little gummy-fied with some lube, but I am pretty religious about cleaning and lubing the chain, so not too terrible worried about that. We've got a little bit of rust on the rollers, but nothing too terrible bad. Mostly just road grime and gunkiness. So let's get into this inspection using the knowledge that we learned just a minute ago, and we'll see what we find. We're going to use a digital caliper again. We're going to identify the chain, even though I already know what it is. We're going to go over it just to be clear. We'll grab a rivet, zero out, and then measure across 2 of them. 623, 625 would be 5/8, so we know we've got a 5 chain. Now the inside width, zero out again, measure the inside at a roller. There we get 320. 0.3125 would be 5/16, which would be a 525 chain. They're normally a little bit oversized anyway for clearance to let grease and grime out of there. So we know that this is a 525 chain. Knowing that, we can get into the inspection. So most chain wear happens in the form of stretch. It can be measured and noted in the pitch measurement, which is that pin to pin length, or you can also measure over the roller, but the roller gives you a little more margin for error because there can be roller to pin slack. If you have roller slack or worn rollers, a chain replacement is definitely in order, and your sprockets are more than likely worn as well, so they should be swapped out at the same time. A fresh chain on bad sprockets will stretch and fail in significantly less time, so it is much better to replace them as a pair. Now it is possible to scrimp by and just replace a chain, but that's going to come down to really good maintenance, minimal chain stretch, and things that we'll look at on the sprockets here in a minute to inspect tooth wear and chain alignment problems. So to measure stretch pretty accurately, we need to measure over about 3 pins worth of length to figure out roughly how much stretch we've got on the chain, and that will tell us how close we are to replacement, and also if we do need to replace it, how bad off the sprockets may possibly be. You're much better off to try and measure this with a caliper, just because you're going to be measuring a few thousandths of wear. If you're going by the 3% rule, which says that you're allowed 3% of stretch before the chain really needs to be replaced, that's like an industrial standard. In place of the 3% rule, you can limit the stretch to say 1.5%, and that's going to give you enough heads up. You can order a chain and possibly sprockets if you need them, and while those are coming in, if you feel the need to go for a ride, then that little bit of stretch you've already got is not going to be enough for like catastrophic failure. Now to get an idea of stretch, we'll go over 3 rivets here. After measuring across a couple of rivets, we get an average of about 1.233 inches, which nominal length on this chain for 3 pins should be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.25. So this thing actually still checks out in length. I'm going to go ahead and replace this chain just because it is rusty and there is just a little bit of roller slack, and I'll show you what that looks like. So roller slack can show itself in a couple of different ways. If it's really bad, you can actually look at the roller and see that it's like crooked. Sometimes you can reach in there and spin them with your hand and they spin really free. And here's another way. If we're looking at the top side of this chain, I'm going to pull down on the bottom part that's under the swing arm, which is going to pull the links tight. Keep an eye on that roller right there by the heel guard. As I pull down on the bottom, it's going to lift the chain. You can see that roller fell slack. As I let it down, the roller rise up on there. That's a sign that the rollers are starting to get pretty slack on the pins, so the chain might not necessarily be stretched, but it is showing wear from age and just putting miles on it. So some more noticeable symptoms of chain wear sometimes is on the bottom of the chain. This comes down more to stretching or just being really dirty from lack of maintenance. You'll notice like a zigzag, and I'll put up a shot of what that looks like here. And as you roll the chain and inspect each link, you may notice that you've got some like squished out O-rings or busted O-rings, and that happens with age. They're going to soften up and they get a whole lot of flex as the chain is running around the sprocket, especially at highway speeds, so they will eventually give up. So next up on the inspection is to check out the sprocket teeth. We're going to look for worn roots, which is where the roller is going to lay in between the teeth of the sprocket. We're going to look on the sidewall of the sprocket for a wear pattern from the chain link. Now, some light rubbing is not a problem here. Normally just happens from road grime or dirt rubbing in between. If you have excessive wear, especially on one side, that hints toward a bad alignment, which most of the times you can kind of tell that when you're riding the bike because your turn in to the left or the right may be noticeably better or smoother than the turn in the opposite direction. And you may notice this pattern in a layer of like grease and dirt. That is not a big deal. It's actually just from the chain kind of cleaning itself through regular motion, and this should be washed away and cleaned during your regular maintenance. You may see heavy wear on the sides of the teeth, like there's a little bit of a triangle shape to the top of the tooth. If you notice that this is worn smooth on one side or the other, like on our rear sprocket, it's going to show up on the rear side of a tooth. That's the side that the chain is pulling on when accelerating, so any of that extra grime and junk that might be on the roller is going to wear on the tooth, and the tooth is eventually just going to get wear from metal on metal contact anyway. So let's get in here and check out some sprockets. We'll check out the rear first since it's easy to get to, and see what these teeth are looking like. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got a little grease pattern from the side of the chain link, which is not a problem. Wipe that away. And you can see we've got just a little shine happening here from rub, which says that our chain alignment is at least pretty good on this side. We'll check the other side here in just a moment to make sure that it's good. On this side, you can actually see that we do have a little bit of plate wear. There's no noticeable transition where you can feel that it has actually worn the metal, but it is starting to rub through the coating on the sprocket, so that tells me our alignment is off at least slightly. Not enough to really notice on the road, but enough that it is showing up on the sprocket a little bit. Now let's look at the shape of the teeth and we'll see what kind of wear we've got there. So looking at this tooth, the upper side, which would be the rear facing side of the tooth, is not showing much wear at all really. It says that the little bit of grime that has gotten in there has not caused excessive wear. You can see a little metal being displaced on the outside edge of the tooth, which says that it is deforming a little bit, but it's not excessively worn. So whenever it comes time to do the chain replacement, I'm going to go ahead and replace the sprockets as well, just because that's a good idea in general, unless your sprockets are in excellent condition. Now we'll pop the sprocket cover off, take a look at the front sprocket, and see what kind of wear we've got there. You can see this sprocket is actually in pretty good shape too. It doesn't have any excessive wear on either side. It's not excessively dirty anywhere. But since we're going to be replacing the chain and the rear sprocket anyway, we're going to go ahead and swap out the front, just so we know that we're good for a long time to come. With that said, this inspection part is over. We will move on to replacing the chain in a future video. But now you guys know what the numbers on the chain mean, how to inspect a chain, how to measure the chain, what to look for wear. Remember, stay safe, stay sane. We'll catch you next time.